Outside the abode was a flat and spacious area. At this moment, a pillar of flame that shot into the sky was blazing there, and it emanated peerlessly hot divine radiance that even burned the space in its vicinity. A figure was shackled to the flaming pillar. His entire body was chained by violet divine chains, causing it to be impossible for him to struggle free. It was like he was a prisoner who was being punished. If one looked carefully, that figure's hair was disheveled. His clothes were dyed red with blood, and his face had warped and twisted together from pain. However, it wasn't difficult to discern that it was Chen Hongxiu, that young man at the universe-enlightened ancestral god realm who'd paid a visit to Xianxia and given Xianxia a warning. Bang! 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 Violet lightning flickered in the sky as bolts of lightning that were sharp like blades descended and struck forcefully against Chen Hongxiu's body. The pain caused his entire body to twitch violently. Even if he endured it with all his might, he still couldn't help but let out muffled groans that sounded like the breathing of a wild beast. It was an extremely terrifying sight. Coupled with the burning divine flames on the flaming pillar, it simply tortured Chen Hongxiu to the point his skin and flesh split apart, and it was painful to the extreme. Xianxia witnessed such a scene as soon as he walked out of his abode, and his eyes couldn't help but narrow while his expression turned cold and indifferent. The abode he was temporarily residing in was located here. Yet now, Chen Hongxiu had been shackled on a flaming pillar and was suffering punishment of being struck by lightning. So, for who was all of this prepared? Xianxia's gaze moved away, and he saw a group of figures standing before a violet-colored lotus platform that floated in the sky at the side, and they were like a group of stars that were surrounding the moon. The violet lotus platform was crystalline and cloudy like jade, and it emanated a divine and natural aura of the Tao. At this moment, a proud and arrogant figure was lying back casually on it. That figure wore a loose and gorgeous golden robe, had violet hair that hung above his shoulders, and a cold, arrogant, evil, yet handsome appearance. His eyes were narrow and long like blades, his skin was jade white, and his lips were puckered lightly to form a merciless and chilly arc. As he sat casually on the violet lotus platform, he seemed to be carefree, but his entire body emanated an imposing aura of supremacy that caused one's heart to palpitate. He was extraordinary, and he possessed the might of a seventh-star region lord at least. Xianxia's eyes narrowed when he noticed this gold-robed and violet-haired man. Just based on the man's aura alone, Xianxia was able to determine that his strength was extremely formidable, and it was even superior to any one of the region lords that Xianxia had met in the past. Obviously, it was this gold-robed man who gave the order for Chen Hongxiu to be shackled and punished here. Moreover, his intentions of choosing to punish Chen Hongxiu right in front of Xianxia's abode instead of any other place was self-evident. He was clearly doing this for Xianxia to see. Is it to make an example of him, or to make a show of strength? Xianxia's expression turned cold and indifferent. No matter what the gold-robed man's intentions were, it was clear that he'd come with ill intent. Swoosh! At the instant that Xianxia walked out from within the above, many gazes shot over successively from around the gold-robed man. Their faces either carried expressions of disdain, ghastliness, ridicule, mocking, and so on and so forth. Only the gold-robed man grinned at Xianxia, and then he moved his gaze away and slowly looked towards Chen Hongxiu, who was tied up on the flaming pillar. Chen Hongxiu, do you realize you mistakes? The gold-robed man spoke with a feminine and low voice, and it was quite terrifying. Chen Hongxiu let out a muffled groan, and his eyes were bloodshot. Even if he was in extreme pain, he still gritted his teeth and refused to speak. You traitor! You still refuse to realize your errors? Then let's see how long you can hold on for. A robust man by the gold-robed man's side had suddenly stood forward, and he pointed his finger at Chen Hongxiu as he cursed. Bang! Bang! His voice hadn't finished resounding through the air when numerous thick and huge bolts of violet lightning suddenly descended from the sky again, and they descended forcefully onto Chen Hongxiu. In an instant, Chen Hongxiu's flesh and skin split apart while blood sprayed into the surroundings. Moreover, his bones were even faintly visible. On the other hand, Chen Hongxiu's eyes rolled back from the pain, and he fell unconscious. Even if he was an innate god, he was still unable to endure such cruel punishment for very long. She couldn't help but groan when he saw this. These clansmen of the Chun clan are really ruthless. They even act so ruthlessly towards their own clansmen. How detestable. Wake him up. It's not over yet, so how can he fall unconscious? The gold-robed man chuckled lightly as he rubbed his chin, and he spoke slowly with a merciless and indifferent tone. Hee, that's exactly what I was about to do. The robust man slapped his palm forward forcefully from afar and amidst vicious laughter. Slap! Chun Hongxiu was struck forcefully on the face, causing his face to swell up while his mind was jolted awake from his unconscious state. Chun Xiaoyun, kill me if you dare. Do you? This time, Chun Hongxiu didn't remain silent, and he stared furiously at the gold-robed man while he roared like a wild beast. Chun Xiaoyun, so it's him. When he heard this, she finally knew the identity of the gold-robed man. He'd heard Chun Hongxiu speak of this person. There were 3 overlords amongst all the region lords in the Chun clan, and they possessed extraordinary combat strengths that crushed their peers. Chun Xiaoyun was one of them. Kill you? Wouldn't that be letting a traitor like you off lightning? Chun Xiaoyun, whose figure was resting on the violet lotus platform, had stood up lazily. He kept his hands behind his back as he spoke slowly. Chun Hongxiu, even if you don't admit it, you're unable to deny that you colluded with an outsider and betrayed the clan. I believe no one will object even if I kill a traitor like you. When he spoke up to hear, his narrow and long eyes swept through the others who were by his side, and he said, Right. Yes. All of them agreed in unison. Many even started shouting about killing Chun Hongxiu right now to warn others against following in his footsteps. At this moment, Xi's expression had become indifferently. At this point, how could he be unable to discern that Chun Hongxiu had been dragged into such a situation because of him? Obviously, it was exactly because Chun Xiaoyun and the others had noticed Chun Hongxiu's secret visit to him that they'd regarded him as a traitor. Besides that, the reason they were punishing Chun Hongxiu in front of his abode was obvious. It was clearly because they were trying to make an example of Chun Hongxiu and warn him. After he figured all of this out, how could Shi not feel afraid? Because these bastards hadn't just targeted him, they'd even harmed one of their own clansmen. So, he felt that they were detestable to the extreme. That's nonsense. How did I betray the clan? If you want to kill me, then be frank about it. Is there any need to make such an excuse? Chun Hongxiu roared repeatedly, and he was resentful to the extreme. Moreover, his entire body was trembling, and no one knew if it was because of pain or rage. Nonsense? A wisp of coldness flashed through Chun Xiaoyun's narrow and long eyes, and he waved his hand. Continue the punishment. All right. The robust man revealed a savage smile because he'd been itching to continue for a long time. Wait. She frowned and couldn't help but speak coldly. He was very clearly aware that Chun Hongxiu would definitely be tortured to death if this continued. Slap. However, the robust man acted as if he didn't hear Shi at all, and he swung his palm from afar and struck Chun Hongxiu forcefully on the face. At this moment, Shi was utterly infuriated, and his gaze suddenly locked onto Chun Xiaoyun as he said, Are you sure that you want to continue? Chun Xiaoyun raised his eyes to gaze at Shi before a wisp of an enchanting smile curled up on the corners of his mouth. I'm sorry, but this is an internal matter of my Shi. So, it's best that you don't interfere. As he spoke, he waved his hand towards the robust man, and he indicated that the robust man should continue with the punishment. He didn't pay any attention to Shi at all. Hee. The robust man laughed gloomily, and he acted even more excessively than before. His figure flashed over to the flaming pillar, and then he stretched out his foot and smashed it towards Chun Hongxiu's face. This wasn't a punishment. This was clearly a form of extreme humiliation. Swoosh! However, a figure had suddenly appeared out of thin air before his foot could descend, and this figure stood in front of Chun Hongxiu. Fuck off! Not only did the robust man refuse to stop upon seeing this, he seized the opportunity to stomp his foot towards Shi's chest. Rumble! The strength behind his foot actually multiplied explosively, and even space was blasted into pieces before it. It was obvious that if this kick were to connect with Chen Shi's chest, then the consequences would be horrifying. Chen Xiaoyun and the others revealed a ridiculing expression when they witnessed this scene. "We've finally forced this fellow to make a move." Yes, their only objective behind all of this was to utilize the punishment of Chen Hongxiu to force Chen Shi to stand out. So long as Chen Shi did that, then they would have an excuse to attack Chen Shi. In that way, even Wu Shuichan and Tang Xian would be unable to do anything. Slap. However, before Chen Xiaoyun and the others could even feel delighted, they heard a resounding slap resound, and then the robust man's figure was actually slapped flying. Blood sprayed from his mouth and nose while numerous teeth shot out from his mouth, and he let out a shrill and miserable cry that was horrifying. Thump! His figure crashed to the ground, and his face was swollen like the head of a pig. It was a horrifying and unsightly scene. The robust man was a region lord as well. Yet now, not only was he unable to kick Chen Shi flying, he'd been slapped flying instead. This clearly showed how formidable the strength behind Chen Shi's slap was. In an instant, Chen Xiaoyun and the others opened their eyes wide, and they seemed to not dare believe that the robust man would actually make such a weak display. Before they could even react from their shock, Chen Shi spoke coldly. "I was just standing there, yet you wanted me to fuck off, and you even attacked me. Looks like you clearly have the intention to kill me. Since it's like that, then don't blame me for eliminating you." Swoosh! As soon as his voice had started resounding, his figure had already charged towards the robust man. The corners of Chen Xiaoyun's mouth twitched when he saw this, and he hurriedly shouted, "Wait!" This time, Chen Shi acted as if he hadn't heard it as well. He raised his leg, and it was like a whip that could tear the sky apart as it smashed down forcefully towards the robust man. Earlier, he'd spoken up with the intention of stopping the robust man, but both the robust man and Chen Xiaoyun had completely disregarded him. So how could he pay any attention to Chen Xiaoyun now? He was giving them a taste of their own medicine. Rumble! The robust man was trying to crawl up from the ground with the intention of dodging. However, he couldn't make it in time, and he could only face Chen Shi's attack head-on. However, in merely an instant, he felt a strand of abundant, irresistible, and terrifying energy crash down forcefully. The bones with his arms instantly cracked apart while his entire body was smashed into the ground like a meteor, causing a horrifying and large hole to be smashed open on the ground while dust and dirt fluttered suffused the air. The robust man was completely unrecognizable. His entire body was bathed in blood, and his eyes rolled back before he fell unconscious. This scene caused the eyes of those clansmen from the Chun clan to almost split apart from rage, and their faces were gloomy and unsightly. "You're courting death!" Chen Xiaoyun moved amidst an icy cold shout. His figure was like a wisp of golden light that swiftly tore through space and shot explosively towards Chen Shi. Chen Xiaoyun's figure shot over like a shadow, and it swiftly appeared in front of Chen Shi. OM! A strand of violet light was coiled around the tip of his finger. While it seemed to be inconspicuous, it emanated a sharp and ear-piercing howl as it shot through the air, and it displayed terrifying penetrative power. As one of the three strongest overlords amongst the region lords in the Chun clan, Chen Xiaoyun's cultivation was at the 7th-star region lord realm. Moreover, coupled with the innate ability he possessed as a member of the Divine Tao Protector clans, his combat strength was undeniably formidable. It was obvious that merely this attack alone was sufficient to make most region lords in the outside world feel fear and be afraid to bear the brunt of it. The fight is finally about to begin. Two figures were standing in midair extremely far away. One wore plain clothes, had a handsome appearance, and emanated a clean, simple, and extraordinary aura. The other figure was a woman. She wore a fiery red dress, had willow leaf-shaped brows that were sharp like blades, a pair of delicate and charming red lips, and a peerlessly beautiful face that was covered in icy coldness and haughtiness. They were clearly watching all of this in secrets, and a wisp of anticipation arose on their originally calm faces when they saw Chen Xiaoyun attack ferociously. If Chen Xiaoyun was here, he would definitely be able to realize to his surprise that they were Chen Daoyuan and Chen Qiushui, who were one of the three overlords just like him. The situation was tense, and the battle erupted. When facing Chen Xiaoyun's sudden attack, she swiftly turned around to face Chen Xiaoyun as well. However, to the surprise of everyone, he actually didn't move at all and showed no intention of blocking this attack at all. It was even to the extent that he hadn't even tried to dodge. He just stood there silently with a calm and indifferent expression, and his black eyes were tranquil and calm like an ancient well. He seemed as if he hadn't noticed the arrival of danger at all. Chen Xiaoyun's eyes swiftly narrowed while killing intent flashed within them. However, right at this critical moment, he surprisingly stopped abruptly and withdrew his attack as well. At this moment, his finger that was covered in violet light was less than 3 inches away from Chen Shi's neck. Under such circumstances, he could easily annihilate Chen Shi as long as he was willing to do so. However, he didn't move at all. This astounded and bewildered all the spectators, and they were unable to figure out exactly what was going on. "Why aren't you retaliating?" Chen Xiaoyun's expression was icy cold as his narrow and long eyes stared at Chen Shi. "Why aren't you attacking?" Chen Shi replied with a question while his expression remained calm as before. Chen Xiaoyun fell silent for a short while before he said coldly, "Do you really think I don't dare to kill you?" Chen Shi suddenly smiled, and then he stretched out his hand to flick Chen Xiaoyun's finger like he was flicking a smoke away. After that he said, "You don't dare, right?" Chen Xiaoyun's face sank while killing intent suffused his eyes, and he seemed to be on the verge of being unable to restrain himself. However, Chen Shi seemed completely indifferent, and he even couldn't be bothered to spare a glance at Chen Xiaoyun. He turned around and walked over to the flaming pillar, and then he crushed the violet divine chains that bound Chen Hongxiu's body. During this entire process, Chen Xiaoyun was constantly looking at him with a cold gaze. There were many times that Chen Xiaoyun wanted to seize this opportunity to kill Chen Shi, but he didn't do so in the end. "If you want to look for trouble with me again, then just come directly for me. There's no need to threaten me with the life of your own clansmen. That's very shameless." After he rescued Chen Hongxiu, Chen Shi turned around to gaze at Chen Xiaoyun before he shook his head and sighed while he left. In an instant, Chen Xiaoyun's expression changed even more indeterminately, and he stood there silently while staring fixedly at Chen Shi. Even when Chen Shi's figure had vanished into the above, Chen Xiaoyun was still standing there, while a cold glow surged in his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. "Big brother Xiaoyun, why did you let him go?" Those other clansmen in the vicinity charged over with disgruntled expressions. They were unable to comprehend Chen Xiaoyun's actions, because it was clearly a superb opportunity, so they wondered why he'd stopped. "All of you wouldn't understand." Chen Xiaoyun suddenly sighed and seemed to be slightly agitated. He flicked his sleeve and returned to the violet lotus platform before swiftly soaring into the sky and leaving. "What?" Those clansmen exchanged glances with each other. After a short while, they still seemed to be rather frustrated and disgruntled as they brought the unconscious robust man with them and left. That kid was quite courage. He was sure that Xiaoyun wouldn't harm him at this time. Chun Daoyuan, who wore plain clothes and stood in the distance, spoke with a smile on his face. "Unfortunately, we weren't able to witness that kid's ability. Courage? It looks to me like he knew he wasn't a match for Xiaoyun, so he made an empty show of strength." Chen Qiushui remained indifferent and spoke while his interest in the matter seemed to be flagging. "I told you that he's only a 4th-star region lord, so there's no need to make such a big fuss about it. Qiushui, you're mistaken. He's a personal disciple of Oracle Mountain, and he was even able to make 2 extraordinary figures like Wu Shuachan and Tang Xian accompany him here. That isn't something that just anyone can accomplish." Chun Daoyuan seemed to be lost in thought and said, "But you're not wrong. His cultivation at the 4th-star region lord realm is a huge flaw indeed. So, no matter how heaven-defying his combat strength is, he probably doesn't have much chance to obtain the position of successor in our Chun clan." Chen Qiushui turned around and left while he muttered, "Come, the ancestral worship ceremony will begin 3 days from now. We have to prepare in advance. I heard that fellow Taoists from many other powers will be coming to watch the ceremony. It's truly strength." There weren't this many powers during the last grand ceremony. Chen Daoyuan smiled and left with him. Even though Chen Hongxiu was heavily injured, it was only external injuries that didn't harm his foundation. So, he would be able to make a full recovery with a few days of recuperation. This allowed Chen Shi to heave a sigh of relief. Why didn't you retaliate just now? Chen Hongxiu gasped for breath as he asked this question because he was very curious about it. Chen Shi answered casually. There was no need. There was no need? Chen Hongxiu was astounded. He'd thought of numerous answers yet had never thought of such an answer. That Chen Xiaoyun came over for no other reason than to investigate my strength and ability. So how could I possibly allow him to fulfill his wish? Chen Shi spoke in a carefree manner. Chen Hongxiu couldn't help but ask. But, weren't you worried that he would really kill you? He wouldn't dare to. When he spoke up to hear, Chen Shi pondered deeply before he said, I'm not being arrogant, but he really wouldn't dare allow me to suffer any injuries before the ancestral worship ceremony begins. Why? Asked Chen Hongxiu. If that were to happen, then those two senior brothers of mine would absolutely not let the matter rest. It's even to the extent that if I were to suffer injuries, then it would be equivalent to giving them an excuse to flare up. Under such circumstances, would anyone dare to act in that way? Chen Shi explained patiently, and his words allowed Chen Hongxiu to finally come to an understanding. Chen Hongxiu didn't stay here for too long, and he insisted on leaving after a short while passed. Even though his injuries were heavy, there would probably be no one in the Chen clan who would continue making things difficult for him. Chen Shi personally accompanied Chen Hongxiu out of the abode before he turned around and went back in. Chen Hongxiu's grandfather was Chen Lingjuan's cousin brother during Chen Lingjuan's previous lifetime, and they treated each other like brothers. Moreover, Chen Hongxiu had paid him a visit a few days ago and provided some essential information to Chen Shi. This had Chen Shi feel rather grateful, and it was even to the extent that Chen Shi had decided that he would repay Chen Hongxiu well if he had the chance. To Chen Shi's surprise, Wuxia and Tang Xian, who'd vanished for many days, had returned not long after Chen Hongxiu left. The two of them had headed to pay visits to some seniors of the Chen Shi, and they hadn't returned until now. That had caused Chen Shi to feel slightly worried. So, he was naturally extremely happy when he saw them finally return. However, no matter if it was Wuxia or Tang Xian, they didn't reveal anything about the visits they'd made to those seniors of the Chen clan, and it caused Chen Shi to feel rather depressed. Little junior brother, there's no need to be depressed. The competition will begin in 3 days, and you can feel free to fight as you please. There's no need to hold any apprehensions. Surprisingly, it was Tang Xian who'd always been cold and reserved that had spoken these words. He'd taken the initiative to console Chen Shi, and it caused Chen Shi to be overwhelmed by the sudden favor. After that, Chen Shi vaguely noticed that his senior brothers had probably obtained some gains from the visits they made in the past few days. Wuxia pondered deeply before he said, However, you still have to be on guard against the tricks that Chen Lingkong might play from the shadows. I'm truly worried that this fellow would stop at nothing if he's driven into a corner. Could it be that the imprisonment of my parents was Chen Lingkong's doing? A wisp of realization flashed within Chen Shi's mind. Even though it isn't the entire truth, but it isn't far away. Wuxia patted Chen Shi on the shoulder and said, There's no need to think too much about it. Perhaps your family will be able to reunite in 3 days from now. At that time, your father will tell you everything. Chen Shi nodded. 3 days later, the entire Chen clan seethed with excitement very really in the morning. The clansmen of the Chen clan seemed like a dense tide that converged from all directions within Ninth Spirit World towards the altar. The ancient altar floated in the air and covered an area of over 30 kilometers. Moreover, it was surrounded by 5 peaks that formed a pentagon of the 5 elements, and it was a rather magnificent sight. When Chen Shi, Wuxia, and Tang Xian arrived here together, they saw a dense expanse of figures standing in an orderly manner on the altar. There were at least a few tens of thousands of them. All of them had sincere and solemn expressions on their faces as they remained silent, and the atmosphere here was unprecedentedly solemn and sacred. A white flame was burning at the center of the altar while numerous figures who possessed mighty imposing auras and monstrous divine might stood before the divine flame. When looked at from afar, these figures simply seemed like numerous scorching suns that emanated dazzling and resplendent radiance that was simply blinding. Obviously, those figures belonged to the higher-ups of the Chun Shi who possessed the greatest authority in the clan. Surprisingly, Chun Lingkong's figure was amongst them as well. "Come, let's go watch the ceremony." Wuxia led the way and moved directly to the peak of a mountain. Seats and tables had already been arranged there, and many figures were already seated there. Obviously, they'd come to watch the ceremony as well. When Chun Shi's group arrived here, many of the figures here stood up successively and greeted both Wuxia and Tang Xian. "Grand Lord, fellow Taoist Tang Xian." Chun Shi couldn't help but sigh with emotion when he witnessed this scene. The reputation possessed by my senior brothers is no joke. They enjoy a great reputation even amongst the divine Tao protector clans in the primal chaos origin. Wuxia and Tang Xian responded with greetings to each and every one of them, and then they led Chun Shi along and casually chose a place to sit at. Chun Shi noticed that many gazes had been secretly sizing him up since the beginning, and he couldn't help but feel slightly bewildered by this. Could it be that they as well are aware that I'll be participating in the competition for the next successor of the Chun clan? Before Chun Shi could even figure it out, a desolate sound of the horn suddenly resounded from the ancient altar that floated beneath the sky, and it reverberated through the world. The rumbling of the horn seemed like it had come from the ancient times. It was desolate, solemn, divine, and like an eternal verse of history that spoke about the ancient and dazzling past. For a time, the heavens and the earth were covered in a solemn and sincere atmosphere. The thousands of clansmen from the Chun clan bowed in unison, and they offered up worship towards the divine flame that flickered at the center of the altar. The ancient ceremony they performed, the solemn atmosphere, and the grand scene before him caused Chun Shi to be unable to avoid feeling shocked. This was the Chun clan's ancestral worship ceremony. It was held every 10,000 years, and they prayed for the souls of their ancestors and the eternal inheritance of their clan. However, along with the passage of time, Chun Shi gradually started to feel bored because what he heard from the direction of the altar were rules and teachings of the Chun clan's ancestors, and it was impossible for such things to move Chun Shi in the slightest. After all, in the end, Chun Shi was an outsider to the Chun clan, so he was naturally unable to understand the meaning contained behind all of this. Senior brother Tang Xian, everyone watching the ceremony is from the divine Tao protector clans as well? Asked Chun Shi via voice transmission. Yes. Tang Xian's gaze was locked on the altar in the distance, but he spoke swiftly via voice transmission. Little junior brother, do you want to hear about the divine Tao protector clans? Please do tell me. Chun Shi was bored, so he couldn't help but speak with an interested tone. There's naturally no need to repeat the origins of the divine Tao protectors clans. All of them were innate gods that were born with the chaos was split apart. Tang Xian was very frank and explained patiently. However, according to the varying bloodlines they possessed, these innate gods were divided into different clans, and the Chun clan is one such clan. Presently, according to the varying sizes of their forces, the divine Tao protector clans within the primal chaos origin amount to 5 high-level clans, 16 intermediate-level clans, and over 100 low-level clans. The distribution of low-level clans is the most complicated. They're mixed together in numerous different planes, and the clansmen in each low-level clan is around a few thousand to as little as over 10 people. It's very difficult to make specific differentiation of them. Amongst the 16 intermediate-level clans, every single one of them resides on a plane of their own, while they have over 10,000 clansmen each. For example, the Chun clan is one of the intermediate clans. However, the forces of the Chun clan have been on a gradual decline in the last 10,000 years, and it's much inferior than before. If it's in terms of their true strength, then they're unable to go against the other 15 clans. The high-level clans, on the other hand, naturally possess the largest forces amongst all the divine Tao protector clans. Every single high-level clan occupies at least 3 planes. Their clans are prosperous, filled with experts, and possess an abundance of talented geniuses. It's even not exaggerated to say that while every single high-level clan is slightly inferior to any one of the 5 extremes of the imperial region, they are absolutely not much inferior. Xianxia finally had a clearer understanding of the divine, Dao protector clans when he finished listening to Tang Xian, and he couldn't help but exclaim endlessly with admiration in his heart. If he hadn't come to the primal chaos origin beneath Godrank Mountain this time, then he would have been utterly unable to imagine that such terrifying and great powers actually existed in the world. However, regardless of whether it's the high-level clans, intermediate clans, or the low-level clans, even though they fight endlessly amongst themselves, they are part of the divine Dao protector clans in the end. So, if it's against an enemy from the outside, then the strength they revealed would be unimaginable formidable. At the very least, even the 5 extremes of the imperial region would be extremely fearful of them. Tang Xian continued. If it wasn't for that, the primal chaos origin and even the entire Godrank Mountain wouldn't be under the protection of the divine Dao protector clans, and the powers in the ancient god domain wouldn't be unable to enter this place. Xianxia nodded. So that's how it is. Actually, it was obvious. If all the clans amongst the divine Dao protector clans were combined together, then it would be sufficient to sweep through the entire ancient god domain. Since they were protecting Godrank Mountain while possessing such strength, it was no wonder that this place had been taken to be a prohibited area since the ancient time, and very few dared to trespass here at all. Then how's the relationship between the divine Dao protector clans and the ancient god domain? Asked Xianxia. Neither friend nor foe. Tang Xian thought for a moment before he said, in short, the divine Dao protector clans take pride in being innate gods, and they disdain to be associated with the cultivators of the ancient god domain. However, they didn't take the ancient god domain to be their enemy as well, because in their opinions, the primal chaos origin was the #1 paradise of cultivation in the world, and it was the place closest to the heaven Dao. So, they weren't interested in the ancient god domain at all. Xianxia's brows raised before he chuckled and said, no wonder those fellows acted so arrogantly and haughtily, as if they were superior since we came to the Qian clan. Tang Xian spoke with ridicule. That's a common flaw they have. After experiencing countless years of time, it had fused completely in their blood, and it's impossible to change. But there's no doubt that the forces of the divine Dao protector clans are formidable indeed. That's something we have to admit, otherwise, it would be impossible for the divine Dao protector clans to occupy the primal chaos origin until now without anyone being able to shake their position. He paused for a moment before he continued. Simply speaking, conceit, arrogance, and strength. These 3 words can fully summarize the divine Dao protector clans. Xianxia couldn't help but sigh with emotion when he heard this. When compared with them, it really is easy for one to feel frustrated. Because regardless of whether it's natural talent, resources, reserves, bloodline, inheritance, they have great fortune in all of it, and the cultivators of the outside world can't compare to them at all. Tang Xian said, yes, no one in this world can compete with the divine Dao protector clans when it comes to the conditions they are born with. However, what happens later is difficult to say for certain. For example, you, eldest senior brother, and many other disciples in the 5 extremes of the imperial region aren't inferior to the members of the divine Dao protector clans at all. He paused for a moment before he continued. Most importantly, since the chaos of the 3 dimensions had been split open, not a single one of the truly formidable innate gods had been willing to stay in the primal chaos origin forever. Just like the chaotic divine lotus, divine Dao parasol tree, all of them were the same. Xianxia had a deep understanding of this. At this instant, he even realized that all the figures who were truly considered as supreme in the world seemed to not be amidst the divine Dao protector clans. For example, Fuxi, who was the master of Oracle Mountain, the master of Nuwas Dao Palace, the Sovereign Sect's master, the Dao Institute's dean, and the Divine Institute's dead were all extraordinary and supreme figures. While the divine Dao protector clans are formidable, they'll never be able to escape the Heaven Dao. Both their success and failure are due to the Heaven Dao. Because they'd obtained too much favor from the Heaven Dao, it has become a restraint instead. So, they have a very tiny hope of being able to seek and ascend the end of the ultimate path. A wisp of familiar ridicule appeared on the corners of Tang Xian's mouth. Everyone says that the sovereign sect is a dog of the heaven Daos, and this description can be utilized on the divine Dao protector clans as well. They are born here, cultivate here, and protect the God rank mountain for eternity. Is this any different from being a dog? She couldn't help but feel astounded. Never had he imagined that his senior brother Xianxia, who was usually cold and reticent, would actually talk so much with him. Nor had he imagined that the divine Dao protector clans would actually seem like watchdogs when Xianxia spoke about them. In the end, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry because Xianxia himself was a descendant of the divine Dao protector clans. All those years ago, if I didn't do everything in my power to struggle free of the clan's restraints and solely concentrate on seeking my true path towards the Dao, then I would probably have no choice but to stay in the primal chaos origin for eternity as well. Xianxia seemed to feel fortunate. She couldn't help but smile with understanding. Even though every single disciple of Oracle Mountain acted independently of each other, they had a common characteristic, and it was that they stayed true to their hearts and never made compromise. At this point in their conversation, a dignified voice suddenly resounded through the heavens and the earth, and it drew the attention of everyone. Everyone, the ceremony is over, but the curtains to a grand even are about to be drawn. It was Chun Lingkong who stood at the center of the altar that spoke these words. He had his arms behind his back, his clothes fluttered with the wind, and his face was covered in a dignified expression while his voice swept through the surroundings. This time, my Chun clan will select a successor to take control of the clan from amongst our clansmen at the Region Lord realm. Even if they were aware of it, a wave of restless movement still arose in the surroundings when they heard Chun Lingkong announce it himself. The thousands of members of the Chun clan revealed a wisp of excitement while discussing it endlessly in low voices. Because they were clearly aware that since it was a selection for a successor, then a fierce struggle couldn't be avoided. They'd been waiting with anticipation for this for a very long time. On the other hand, the guests who'd come to watch the ceremony revealed attentive expressions. Because since Chun Lingjun had left for no reason and chosen to reincarnate himself all those years ago, the position of patriarch in the Chun clan had always been empty, and the Chun clan hadn't been able to choose a true leading figure until now. It was exactly because of this that the Chun clan's karmic luck had been affected after Chun Lingjun's departure. Moreover, the forces of the Chun clan didn't reveal such a strong tendency to rise up anymore, and it started to fall into a gradual decline instead. Yet now, the Chun clan intended to choose a successor to ascend to the position of patriarch during the ancestral worship ceremony. So it naturally carried extraordinary meaning. Now, all the clansmen who are participating in the competition should stay behind. Everyone else should leave the altar swiftly, Chun Lingkong announced in a low voice. In next to no time, the thousands of clansmen on the ancient altar had left in succession, and only a little over 10 figures remained standing there. If one counted it carefully, there was a total of 15 figures there. All of them were region lords, and practically all of them were at the 5th-star region lord realm or above. If it was at the ancient god domain, then could any other powers besides the 5 extremes of the imperial region possess 15 region lords of such caliber? It was practically impossible. This clearly showed that while the Chun clan was an intermediate-level divine Dao protector clan, its resources and reserves were absolutely not ordinary. At this moment, 15 region lords were standing upright on the empty ancient altar, and they instantly became the center of attention. The 3 peerless overlords, Chun Daoyuan, Chun Choshui, and Chen Xiaoyun were surprisingly amongst these 15 region lords. Besides that, a fellow Daoist that possesses some relationship with our Chun clan will be participating in this competition as well. Right at this moment, Chun Lingkong's gaze suddenly locked onto Chan Shi, and he said, "Chan Shi, are you prepared?" Swoosh! In an instant, the gazes of everyone in the surroundings moved over and converged onto Chen Shi, and the atmosphere here instantly became slightly complicated. Chun Lingkong's voice hadn't finished resounding through the air when Chan Shi stood up. He was able to clearly sense that the gazes on him carried surprise, disdain, ridicule, doubt. But all of this was unable to shake Chun Shi's determination. His expression was calm and composed as he cupped his hands to his senior brothers, Wu Shuachan and Tang Xian, and then he strode through space towards the altar. His clothes fluttered as he moved forward by himself. The gazes from the surroundings moved along with him, and it was like all of them desired to see exactly what sort of person he was, and where did he get the courage to actually join this competition. However, all of this seemed to be non-existent to Xianxia. At this moment, only the ancient altar and the upcoming battles remained to him. He'd been waiting for this day for too long, and he'd expended boundless effort, blood, and sweat for this. So, he would absolutely not permit himself to fail this time. Because only success would allow him to rescue his parents before the eyes of everyone, and from the Chun clan that was like a tiger's lair. So, he had to win this battle. That fellow is Xianxia? Looks like he isn't very great. Humph. He's just a little bastard from the ancient god domain, yet he arrogantly attempts to encroach on the position of successor in our Chun clan. He's simply overestimating his ability. I'm very curious. Why did the Supreme Elder agree to allowing an outsider like him to participate? Could it be that it's merely because he's a descendant of the criminal Chun Lingjun? But not a trace of the bloodline of our Chun clan flows within his body. Haha, there's no need to be bewildered. No matter how inferior he is, he's a disciple of Oracle Mountain in the end. Even if we refuse to give him face, we have to give Oracle Mountain face in the end. It looks to me like he's asking to be humiliated. I'm very curious. Exactly how strong is his combat strength? After all, this fellow relied on a cultivation at the 4th-star region Lord Realm to defeat Xianxia, who's a 5th-star region Lord, just a few days ago. That's very unusual. Don't you think that this makes it interesting? If he's too weak, then we wouldn't feel a sense of accomplishment even if we defeated him. On the contrary, it would seem like our Chun clan was bullying him. As Xianxia approached the ancient altar, a wave of discussion had arisen in the surroundings as well. The attitudes they held were clear. All of them ridiculed and mocked Xianxia, and they seemed to be very against him. It was like they were watching a clown court death. Only a small portion of them revealed curious expression. Because as far as they were concerned, Xianxia's combat strength would naturally not be weak since he was able to defeat Xianxia. However, they were merely curious about exactly how long Xianxia would be able to persist for during this competition to become the next successor of the clan. As for whether Xianxia could attain victory, they couldn't be bothered to give it any thought. Because as far as they were concerned, since overlord figures like Chen Daoyuan, Chen Qiushui, and Chen Xiaoyun were participating in the competition, then Xianxia would definitely have no chance at attaining victory. Simply speaking, all of them felt doubtful, disdainful, and aversion towards Xianxia's participation in the competition. Even if they felt curious, they were merely curious about why Xianxia would come her to court death and humiliation. This was what all the clansmen of the Chun clan felt, and their opinions were clearly. In their opinion, even though Xianxia was from Oracle Mountain, he was still an outsider in the end. Since an outside actually dared to cover the position of successor in their clan, then wasn't that outsider courting death? On the other hand, the guests who were watching the ceremony were very puzzled by why Qin Lingkong would allow an outsider to participate in such a solemn and serious matter. Could it be that he had no choice but to agree out of consideration for Oracle Mountain's power and influence? Or perhaps it's because of Xianxia's relationship with Chun Lingjun, who has been imprisoned by the Chun clan. All of this was very unusual and it was thought-provoking. However, the more it was like this, the more curious they felt. They wondered what exactly the Chun clan was doing. In next to no time, Xianxia arrived on the ancient altar, and he stood casually at the side of the 15 clansmen of the Chun clan who were participating in the competition. This scene was quite interesting. Xianxia was standing all along by himself while a group of clansmen from the Chun clan stood by his side, and they made clear distinction between each other. While they seemed to be not disturbing each other, they were faintly in confrontation and were like water and fire that couldn't live together. Chun Lingkong, who stood at the center of the altar, acted as if he didn't notice this at all. As soon as Xianxia arrived on the altar, he directly announced the rules of the competition in a deep voice. The competition will be divided into 2 rounds. The first round will be carried out in 4 groups. I'll choose a person from every single group to ascend the combat arena, and that person will be challenged by the other 3 people in the group. The person that's able to persist until the end will enter the second round of the competition. When he spoke up to hear, Chen Lingkong waved his sleeve. Bang! 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 For deafening bangs resounded in succession, and then 4 combat arenas arose on the ancient altar. Every single combat arena was created from strange chaotic rocks. They were densely covered in obscure markings, and they emanated a terrifying aura of war that threw the surroundings into disorder. Obviously, it was capable of guaranteeing that the aftershocks of the battle wouldn't spread into the outside world. At the same time, the individuals battling within it wouldn't be disturbed by forces from the outside world. At this moment, when they heard Chen Lingkong announce the rules and saw the 4 combat arenas, the spectators in the surroundings couldn't help but burst into an uproar, choosing 4 to accept the challenges of the others. Isn't that equivalent to using a few in succession to tire the person out? It doesn't seem too fair, right? No, strictly speaking, it's a battle of dominance over the combat arena. The person that persists on the arena until the end will be the final winner. For combat arenas. So, for victors will be born from the first round of the selection. But these rules, they are really very unfair. The first person to ascend the arena will definitely be at the biggest disadvantage, while the last to ascend the arena would undoubtedly possess the greatest advantage. As they discussed animatedly, even many clansmen of the Chun clan had never imagined that such unique rules would be utilized for the competition. That fellow, Chen Lingkong, is really ruthless. If Chen Lingkong were to send little junior brother up the combat arena first, then little junior brother would have to defeat 3 opponents in succession before he can attain victory in the first round and enter the second round. Tang Xian frowned while his voice was slightly cold. He's just doing everything he can to kick little junior brother out of the competition. Even though his methods are quite despicable, they are normal, said Wuxia in an indifferent tone. Tang Xian said coldly, "It isn't just despicable, it's simply shameless." Wuxia smiled and didn't say anything else. However, there was actually a trace of anger in his heart. But he was very clearly aware that it was useless to flare up right now. At this moment, he could only entrust his hopes on Xianxi's performance during the competition. Silence! Chen Lingkong couldn't help but frown as he listened to the droning sounds of discussion in the surroundings, and he shouted loudly in a deep voice. His voice was like thunder that surged through the world, and it instantly caused the surroundings to fall perfectly silent. If one intends to become our Chun clan's patriarch without the peerless might to fight many and sweep through armies, then how can that person obtain the acknowledgement of everyone? How could that person lead the entire clan? Chen Lingkong berated in a deep voice and spoke with a strong sense of righteousness. If you can't even endure such a test, then how could you possibly carry the heavy responsibility of leading the clan to rise in power? His loud and stern words made many clansmen of the Chun clan feel ashamed in their hearts. Right? How could it be so easy to become the patriarch of our Chun clan? Only Xianxia laughed coldly in his heart. He had a strong feeling that while Chen Lingkong made it sound nice, the rules were actually made in order to deal with him. Sure enough, what happened next proved Xianxi's thoughts. Chen Lingkong didn't utilize any sort of fair method, and he directly divided Xianxia and the other participants into 4 groups. Moreover, Chen Daoyuan, Chen Qiushui, and Chen Xiaoyun weren't in Xianxi's group. This made many clansmen of the Chun clan feel rather puzzled and even displeased. They felt that Chen Lingkong was being considerate to Xianxia and didn't want him to encounter Chen Daoyuan, Chen Qiushui, or Chen Xiaoyun during the first round so that his defeat wouldn't be too embarrassing. Only Xianxia was clearly aware that it wasn't any form of consideration at all, and there was definitely a secret behind all of it. Because if one looked carefully at the situation of the other groups, one would notice that Chen Daoyuan, Chen Qiushui, and Chen Xiaoyun weren't in the same groups as well. In other words, Xianxia, Chen Daoyuan, Chen Xiaoyun, and Chen Qiushui had been divided into different groups. Now, Chen Zhonghe from the first group, Chen Wenwu from the second group, Chen Jing from the third group, and Chen Shi from the fourth group. Step forward. Chen Lingkong spoke in a deep voice. The 4 of you will ascend the combat arena first and accept the challenges of the other 3 in your groups. The loser will be directly eliminated, while the winner will remain on the arena and continue accepting challenges. Once everyone in the group has ascended the combat arena to challenge the person there, then the first round will come to an end. As expected, Xianxia laughed coldly in his heart. He knew that he would definitely be the first to be chosen. At this moment, it wasn't just Xianxia who's realized. Everyone in the surroundings had realized as well, especially those other clansmen of the Chun clan. They couldn't help but start laughing with ridicule as if they'd seen something amusing. Tang Xian and Wu Shuachan exchanged glances, and they both remained silent. No one knew exactly what they were thinking right now. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The other three who Chun Lingkong had named charged up onto the combat arena. When he saw this, Xianxia stopped hesitating as well. Even if he felt extremely disdainful towards Chun Lingkong's despicable tactics, he had no choice but to face it head-on. Swoosh! Xianxia's figure flashed onto the fourth combat arena. As he stood there and swept his gaze through the surroundings, he instantly noticed that Chen Daoyuan, Chen Qiushui, and Chen Xiaoyun's gazes were looking towards him. They seemed to have no intention to challenge their opponents right now, and they seemed completely calm, composed, and carefree. Xianxia's heart fell when he noticed this, and he instantly thought of a possibility. Could Chun Lingkong have made such arrangements so that they can seize this opportunity to watch me fight and get a good grasp of my ability? That's definitely his intention. Xianxia instantly made this evaluation. If he were to lose in the first round, then there would be nothing further to say. But if he were to win in the first round, then Chen Daoyuan and the others would definitely be able to obtain a clear evaluation of his combat strength through the battles that he fought. In that way, they could adopt strategies against him when they fought him during the second round. Xianxia even guessed that Chen Daoyuan, Chen Qiushui, and Chen Xiaoyun would definitely be the last to ascend the arena during the first round. In that way, they could conceal even more strength to deal with the second round of the competition. The facts of the situation were exactly as Xianxia had deduced. If one observed the situation in the first round of the competition, it wasn't difficult to notice that the dangers Xianxia faced were roughly divided into two types. The first type was his opponents that would ascend the combat arena during the first round. Xianxia would have to face challenges from the other three experts in his group, and he wouldn't have any time to recuperate and recover in between battles. That was no different than allowing his enemies to fight him in succession in order to weaken him. Just think about it, was even one of the participants in the competition not an outstanding figure from the Chun clan? Was any one of them not a 5th-star region lord or above? If it was any other 4th-star region lord who had to go against 3 challengers like these, that person would have felt despair and admitted defeat a long time ago. This clearly showed how difficult the first round of the competition was. The second danger was that even if Xianxia was able to defeat those 3 challengers in succession, it would definitely exhaust a huge amount of his strength and even expose numerous trump cards of his. All of this would be watched by Chen Daoyuan, Chen Qiushui, and Chen Xiaoyun. This means that Xianxia's situation in the second round would be very bad. No matter if it was the first danger or the second, the situation was disadvantageous to Xianxia. It was even to the extent that Xianxia wasn't in a promising situation even before the battles had begun. This was clearly Chun Lingkong's objective, and he'd done so for the sake of completely crushing Xianxia and eliminating Xianxia from the competition. On the other hand, Chen Daoyuan, Chen Qiushui, and Chen Xiaoyun were clearly in a very advantageous position. Firstly, they weren't the first to ascend the combat arenas in their respective groups. This meant that they could all be the last challenger in their respective groups, and they only had to defeat a single opponent in order to smoothly enter into the second round. In this way, they wouldn't just be able to preserve their strength, they would be able to avoid exposing their trump cards to a huge degree. So, they were obviously at a huge advantage when compared to Xianxia. Secondly, their combat strengths were undoubtedly formidable, and they were the top 3 overlord-level figures in the region lord realm within the Chun clan. Under such circumstances, Xianxia would still have to face the threat they posed even if he entered the second round. Moreover, they would definitely be able to determine the strength Xianxia possessed through observing the battles, and they could specially formulate strategies against Xianxia. As it was said, knowing the enemy is the key to remaining undefeated in battle. Under such circumstances, how could it be considered as fair at all? There was no fairness at all. As for the other participating clansmen of the Chun clan, were they just sacrificing themselves in order to help Chun Daoyuan and the others? Obviously, the answer was yes. Unless Xianxia was eliminated during the battles in the first round, they would definitely open up a path for Chun Daoyuan and the others in order to deal with Xianxia. This was Chun Lingkong's scheme. It was just a simple competition to become the successor of the clan, but he'd forcefully utilized the rules to transform it into a scheme that targeted Xianxia. Since Xianxia was able to discern this, the others could naturally discern it as well. However, such arrangements would only make the members of the Chun clan feel even more pity for Xianxia, yet they wouldn't feel any sympathy. On the other hand, Wu Shuachan and Tang Xian had noticed this as well, but they were unable to change anything now. After all, it was the territory of the Chun clan, so they couldn't break the rules set by the Chun clan. However, Chun Lingkong's actions had still made them feel infuriated, and they'd committed this enmity to memory. The Chun clan is going a bit too far. Some spectating guests frowned. It was very difficult for them to imagine that Chun Lingkong would actually scheme against a disciple of Oracle Mountain in such a brazen and open manner. In my opinion, the Chun clan is being too cautious. Some felt indifferent as well, and they didn't understand why Chun Lingkong would act in this way. They felt that there was utterly no need for such arrangements in order to deal with just Xianxia, and they felt that Chun Lingkong was being too careful and such actions were beneath him. However, no matter what, the battles were about to begin, and no one could change anything now. Before the battles begin, I have to remind all of you that you're free to utilize any ability, so long as you don't kill your opponent. Chun Lingkong had a dignified expression as he spoke in a low voice. Supreme Elder, can we cripple our opponent's cultivation? Suddenly, one of the participating clansmen of the Chun clan had interrupted. These words caused the hearts of everyone to tremble, and many of them seemed to glance at Xianxia. Obviously, they'd guessed that this question was targeted at Xianxia. After all, besides Xianxia, all the other participants of the competition were from the Chun clan, so they would absolutely not act so ruthlessly against someone from their own clan. Crippling the cultivation of someone was crueler than killing the person. At this instant, Xianxia's deep and dark eyes couldn't help but narrow while a wisp of imperceptible coldness flashed within them. These bastards actually intend to seize this opportunity to cripple me? They're going too far. The displeasure that had been accumulating in Xianxia's heart for so long had fully transformed into rage at this moment, and it made his expression become even more calm and indifferent. I've told you, it's all right so long as you don't kill your opponent. Chun Lingkong remained silent for a short while before he spoke lightly, and his voice was calm and completely emotionless. Good. That cultivator who asked the question clapped and praised while he revealed an excited and arrogant expression. He wore a violet robe, had a gaze that was sharp like a bolt of lightning, and his entire body was suffused by an oppressive, wild, and unrestrained aura. He stretched out his hand to point a finger at Xianxia, who stood on the combat arena, and he said, "Xianxia, I'll challenge you." As he spoke, he took a step forward. Bang! Space shattered as his figure arrived on the combat arena in the next moment, and he stood in confrontation with Xianxia from afar. Every single move, action, and word of his was extremely arrogant and haughty. The gazes of practically everyone in the surroundings converged over and descended onto Xianxia and the violet-robed man. Even Chun Daoyuan, Chun Qiushui, and Chun Xiaoyun were no exception. Chun Bailing, I never expected that he would actually be the first to challenge that fellow, Xianxia. It's obviously a waste of his talents. Of course, Chun Bailing attained the 6-star region Lord Realm a few thousand years ago, and his combat strength is ferocious and formidable. Moreover, he acts in a ruthless and decisive manner. Xianxia might really be crippled by him. Haha! If I were Xianxia, I would rather admit defeat than allow me cultivation to be crippled. After all, that's truly a horrible outcome. The sounds of discussion arose in the surroundings, and practically no one looked favorably upon Xianxia. The amusing part of all of this was that the battles on the other 3 combat arenas were clearly about to begin as well, but there were actually very few people that were paying attention to it. Obviously, it was because Xianxia's appearance and caused the meaning of the competition to change. Everything had started to be aimed at Xianxia. Xianxia remained motionless on the combat arena, and his expression was calm and indifferent, as if he hadn't noticed the conversations in the surroundings. However, he hadn't forgotten that this fellow, Chun Bailing, who descended the combat arena right now, was exactly that fellow who's spoken up earlier with the intention of crippling him. Xianxia, external forces can't interfere in the battles that occur on this combat arena. So you better not go crying to Oracle Mountain if I were to cripple you in the battle. It would truly be a humiliation if you were to do that. Ha ha ha. Chun Bailing roared with laughter while he revealed an arrogant expression, and his tone was completely unrestrained. It was like Xianxia, who was only at the 4th star region Lord Realm, was merely an ant that he could trample on at will. Thank you for the reminder. It would be great if no one can interfere in the battle. Xianxia spoke indifferently. His voice was calm, yet it carried a confrontational tone, and it made Chun Bailing chuckled coldly. Bang! A myriad of strands of brilliant green radiance erupted from within him. In an instant, it was like he'd transformed into an extremely lofty mountain, and his imposing aura was powerful, boundless, and immovable. Hurry up, little fellow. I can't wait to snap your spine. As he shouted loudly, Chun Bailing spread his arms, and then an enormous green sword took form. The body of the sword was over 3 m long, and it was densely covered in the natural aura of the Tao. Moreover, it was densely covered in the Tao laws, and it was extremely dazzling and resplendent. Rumble! Space exploded into pieces, and it was like space was unable to endure the might of the green sword. It was really extremely terrifying, and it vividly displayed the strength of a 6-star region lord. Obviously, even if he was filled with disdain towards Xianxia, but as a top-rate expert who possessed abundant experience in battle, Chun Bailing hadn't underestimated Xianxia at all. Moreover, he'd revealed an extremely murderous, fierce, violent, and overbearing move as soon as he attacked. In merely an instant, his display caused a wave of cheers to resound in the surroundings. Even the great figures of the Chun clan like Chun Lingkong nodded to themselves. They knew that Chun Bailing hadn't underestimated his opponent out of arrogance, and that was enough for them. After all, Chun Bailing's cultivation and combat strength was obvious. So long as he fought normally and wasn't careless, then it would be sufficient for him to have a firm grasp of the situation and defeat his enemy. However, even though Chun Bailing made an extremely arrogant display, Xianxia was even more domineering and overbearing than him. Xianxia had acted as soon as Chun Bailing attacked. A clear howl resounded from the pitch-black and dark talisman armament as it appeared in Xianxia's palm, and then his figure vanished on the spot. Swoosh! At practically the exact same moment, a strand of sword chi that was ethereal, gentle, and seemingly carefree and ordinary had suddenly surged into appearance. This wisp of sword chi was so inconspicuous that it hadn't caused any alarm since the moment it had appeared, and it was very easy for others to overlook its existence. However, as soon as it appeared, an invisible force field had suddenly swept out, and it caused the atmosphere in the entire combat arena to seem as if it had suffered absolute suppression, and it fell into a deathly silent state. Chun Bailing's shout had vanished, and the howl that came from the peerlessly violent, enormous green sword in his hand seemed to have been frozen. Even the shattered expanse of space and chaotic airflow had suddenly stopped moving, and it formed a strange scene that instilled horror in the hearts of all. Chun Bailing's pupils suddenly constricted. He was actually unable to lock onto Xianxia's figure, and it was like Xianxia had evaporated into thin air. This sudden scene caused his heart to tremble. Shit! As a 6-star region lord, Chun Bailing's will was extraordinarily enormous, yet he wasn't even able to lock onto his opponent right now. So how could he not become vigilant because of this? He didn't have the time to think, and he practically instinctively broke down the enormous green sword in his palm, and it transformed into a myriad of specks that were fine like the hairs on an ox. They swept towards the surroundings and enveloped the entire combat arena. When looked at from afar, an illusory and dreamlike green storm had suddenly poured down, and every single droplet of rain was formed from terrifying sword intent. Such an attack that covered the entire area was sufficient to force Xianxia's figure out. That was what Qin Bailing thought. However, to his surprise, it was at this instant that a wisp of ethereal and ordinary sword chi that was faint like mist had suddenly appeared. It was so inconspicuous, yet it was like the sign of a calamity. As soon as it appeared here, it was like everything on the combat arena had suffered a form of absolute suppression. Space, airflow, light, sound. Everything was subdued by it, and the surroundings fell into a seemingly frozen state. Even the myriad of droplets of green sword intent didn't even have the time to release their might before they suddenly froze and became motionless. This scene occurred so quickly, and it was extremely odd and shocking. Qin Bailing felt indescribable coldness surge into his heart. It made every single inch of his skin shudder, and it was like he'd fallen into an icy pit. He'd even sensed an extremely strong feeling of lethal danger. How terrifying! The arrogance he revealed had vanished. The haughty and oppressive edge he displayed was gone. He felt a form of unprecedented suffocation. No. How could this have happened? He's clearly just a little bastard from the ancient god domain, and he's merely at 4th star region lord. How could he execute such a terrifying attack? This is definitely an illusion. Qin Bailing howled in his heart while he felt both shocked and furious. He originally hoped to crush Xianxia in one go and trample on Xianxia before the eyes of everyone, and he intended to torture Xianxia with all his ability before crippling Xianxia's cultivation. Never had he imagined that such a shocking change in the situation would actually occur as soon as the battle began. Qin Bailing was unable to accept this. His pride, the bloodline that flowed within him, and his dignity as an innate god was unable to accept all of this. Bang! The thoughts in his mind were chaotic. However, all of this occurred in a very short instant. At this moment, he faced such lethal danger, so Qin Bailing had fully released his complete might. His entire body seemed as if it was burning, and he seemed like an infuriated, ferocious beast from the primeval times. The innate energy within his bloodline transformed into blazing green radiance that swept out from within him and shot into the sky. In an instant, Qin Bailing's might had actually increased by more than 2 times. Needless to say, as one of the most outstanding experts in the Region Lord realm within the Qin clan, Qin Bailing, who was a 6-star Region Lord, was extraordinary indeed. He didn't just possess deep reserves, his combat experience far exceeded his peers as well. In this short instant, he'd already made the most direct and correct form of retaliation. A mysterious green totem appeared, and it stood in front of him. The mysterious totem seemed like a bird yet wasn't one. Seemed like a fish yet wasn't one as well. Strange and twisted markings of the Tao crisscrossed through it in a complicated manner, and it emanated a grand and dazzling glow. Obviously, this was definitely a trump card of Qin Bailing's. If he wasn't facing extreme danger right now, then he would probably not utilize it rashly. The totem glowed and was enshrouded by light that carried a horrifying aura. This allowed Qin Bailing to finally feel slightly at ease. Swoosh! Right at this moment, that wisp of sword chi that was faint like mist had arrived soundlessly. Pooh! The green mysterious totem was swiftly slashed apart like it was a weak piece of paper. At this instant, Qin Bailing's heart shook violently, and he lost his composure, causing his face to be drowned in boundless shock. Never had he imagined that his trump card would actually still be incapable of blocking a single attack from Xianxia. How could this be possible? Why is this happening? Why? Extreme terror and unwillingness surged and drowned Qin Bailing's mind, and then a strand of extremely intense pain came from the center of his forehead. Crack! It was the sound of his skull cracking. Bang! After that, it was like Qin Bailing's consciousness was struck by lightning and forcefully blasted apart. It was shattered into pieces, and he completely lost consciousness. All of this took a long time to describe yet actually occurred in an instant. Since the moment that the battle had begun until Xianxia vanished on the spot while executing that extremely casual attack, and then Qin Bailing counterattacked and formed that mysterious green totem. This string of actions had been completed at an inconceivably swift pace. Those in the surroundings who were below the Region Lord realm didn't even have the chance to see anything clearly, and it was even to the extent that they hadn't even reacted to what had happened. However, to the experts who were at the Region Lord realm or above, those scenes from before could simply be described as horrifying and extremely dangerous. No one had expected that Chun Bailing, whom they'd entrusted great hopes to, would have actually suffered absolute suppression from a single strand of sword chi right after the battle began. Moreover, no one had imagined that the wisp of sword chi Chun she executed would actually contain such terrifying might. It was even to the extent that they didn't even have the time to think before they saw the battle come to an end. On the combat arena, Chun Bailing stood on the spot by himself, and his enormous figure casted a huge shadow on the ground, yet he remained motionless like a status. Besides that, a strand of scarlet-red blood was gurgling out from the center of his forehead, and it seemed extremely horrifying when his fresh blood flowed past his face that had turned ghastly pale from terror. Clang! A sword howl resounded. Chun Shi's figure appeared in front of Chun Bailing, and his dense jet-black hair fluttered along his clothes. His expression was calm and indifferent just as it was before the battle had begun, and it hadn't changed at all. The talisman armament in his hand had already been put away, and only that sword howl was drifting through the deathly silent combat arena. The spectators in the surroundings were deathly silent when they witnessed this scene. All of their faces were covered in shock, wonder, horror, disbelief. At this moment, the world was actually strangely silent. Everything that occurred earlier had been too quick. So many hadn't been able to recover from their shock. Bang! After a short while, Chun Bailing's robust figure crashed to the ground, and he laid motionlessly on the ground like a corpse. This sudden event was like a signal that caused the deathly silent atmosphere to be destroyed, and a mighty uproar erupted. He lost? Chun Bailing actually lost? Impossible. That's absolutely impossible. What a terrifying attack. The battle had just begun, yet it has already ended. How could this possibly be something that a 4th-star Region Lord could accomplish? Could Chun Ziyu have been defeated in the same way a few days ago? What exactly occurred just now? Why has Chun Bailing, a 6th-star Region Lord, lost to an outsider? This isn't real. It's definitely not real. All sorts of shocked exclaims resounded, and it was like a clamorous scene swept through every single inch of space. Those clansmen of the Chun clan felt disbelief, and they were unable to accept such a scene. In their expectations, Chun Bailing should have made a display of his invincible might and trampled upon Chun Shi. Never had they imagined that the battle would come to an end in an unexpected manner as soon as it had just started. This was too shocking. Even a Dao Lord like Chun Lingkong had been stunned for a moment before he returned to his senses, and his expression instantly became gloomy. Yes, even he hadn't imagined that such an unexpected event would actually occur during the first battle. Since it was like that for even Chun Lingkong, it was obvious how complicated the feelings of those clansmen of the Chun clan was right now. Instant defeat. Beautiful. Wuxia and Tang Xian exchanged glances and smiled at each other. Both of them exclaimed endlessly with praise in their hearts. Perhaps even they hadn't imagined that their little junior brother would actually be so formidable. What a ruthless little bastard. He actually crippled Bailing's sea of consciousness. An elder of the Chun clan had entered the combat arena to check on Chun Bailing's injuries, and his face instantly turned gloomy as he gritted his teeth and shouted. His sea of consciousness was crippled. In an instant, clamorous noise arose in the surroundings, because the sea of consciousness was where the soul resided, and once it was crippled, it was equivalent to transforming its owner into a cripple as well. Even if it could be repaired in the future, it would greatly affect Chun Bailing's cultivation. Not to mention that techniques capable of repairing the sea of consciousness were unprecedentedly rare. Damn it! This is simply more ruthless than killing Chun Bailing. This is simply unforgivable. Some clansmen of the Chun clan were filled with righteous indignation, and they howled in succession and cursed Chan Shi. Moreover, their words were extremely unpleasant. Fellow Taoist Lingkong, it was you who set the rules, and you even said yourself that they can't do anything so long as they didn't kill their opponent. Now that my little junior brother has attained victory, he actually has to suffer such insult and blame. Could it be that you really think there's no one capable in my Oracle Mountain? Suddenly, Wuxia stood up with an indifferent expression on his face, and he spoke coldly. His voice wasn't loud, yet it was like a thunderclap that rumbled and surged through the hearts of everyone, and it caused the clamorous noise in the surroundings to instantly vanish. Chun Lingkong's expression changed slightly, and then he took a deep breath and said, "Grand Lord, please calm your rage. It's just some clamorous noise, and it's unavoidable. I will naturally not allow all of this to delay the battles of the competition." As he spoke, his expression became cold as he instructed that elder from the Chun clan. "Take him off the arena. Don't delay the competition." That elder's expression changed indeterminately. In the end, he held Chun Bailing's figure in anger and left the combat arena. From the beginning until the end, Chun Shi's expression hadn't changed at all. Since Chun Bailing had threatened to cripple him, then he would naturally not wait helplessly for Chun Bailing to cripple him. This was the punishment that he gave Chun Bailing. "Now, who else wants to come and challenge me? Feel free to ascend the arena and fight me." Chun Shi turned around, and his gaze swiftly swept towards the other two clansmen of the Chun clan in the fourth group. His voice was calm and flat, yet it carried an invisible oppressive force. "This fellow is simply too arrogant." This scene caused many clansmen of the Chun clan to feel furious, and they gnashed their teeth with hatred. However, the guests who were observing the competition couldn't help but exclaim with admiration, "This disciple of Oracle Mountain is truly courageous and extremely arrogant." Chun Shi's voice was still reverberating through the air, yet there was actually no one who answered him. This caused the atmosphere here to become deathly silent and slightly oppressive. So, everyone couldn't help but move their gazes towards the other two members of the Chun clan who were in the fourth group like Chun Shi. Before the battles of the first round had been conducted, Chun Shi and three other clansmen of the Chun clan had been divided into the fourth group. Chun Shi was the first in the fourth group to ascend the combat arena, so if he had to successively defeat the other three clansmen of the Chun clan in order to enter the second round of the competition. Now, Chun Bailing had been defeated, so only two more remained. One of them was Chun Shuza. He possessed a cultivation at the peak of the 6-star region Lord Realm. He wore black clothes, had a thin figure, and a capable and cold bearing. He was like a spar that could pierce through the sky, and he gave others the feeling that he was the edge of a blade that was without any restraint. The other was Chun Wenyu. He was a middle-aged man with white hair and beard. He was a 7th-star region lord with skin that was tender like the skin of a baby, and his vital energy was completely restrained while his bearing was rather steady. However, at this moment, both of them couldn't help but reveal a wisp of hesitance when they heard Chun Shi declare war against them. Earlier, Chun Bailing had been defeated too quickly, and the consequences Chun Bailing faced were even horrifying. Even the two of them had been deterred by it. Even though it wasn't to the extent of dread, they still had a trace of fear towards the terrifying combat strength that Chun Shi revealed. "Fight!" A shout suddenly resounded. "Fight! Fight!" After that, all the clansmen of the Chun clan started to shout loudly as well, and their voices shot into the 9 heavens. They were unable to allow their own clansmen to be fearful and shrink back from battle. "I'll do it!" In the end, a wisp of coldness suddenly flashed through Chun Shu's eyes, and then he swiftly stepped forward and flew towards the combat arena. The other clansmen of the Chun clan in the surroundings cheered and shouted when they saw this, and they revealed excited expressions once more. Compared to Chun Bailing from before, Chun Shu's cultivation was clearly much greater. Most importantly, Chun Shuza possessed extraordinarily outstanding combat experience and superb techniques in battle. Since he'd stepped forward to challenge Chun Shi, then he had a good chance of victory if he were to be slightly cautious. This was the common view of all clansmen from the Chun clan. As far as they were concerned, even though the attack Chun Shi utilized to defeat Chun Bailing just now was astounding, so long as Chun Shuza was able to resist that attack, then he would definitely be able to completely suppress Chun Shi. Moreover, with Chun Bailing's defeat as an example, they believed that Chun Shuza would definitely not make the same mistake. After all, Chun Shuza was only a step away from stepping foot into the 7-star region Lord Realm. On the other hand, Chun Shi was merely a 4th-star region lord. So long as the battle were to begin and Xianxia didn't give Xianxia any time to catch his breath, then he would definitely be able to attain victory. Of course, this was merely what those other clansmen of the Chun clan thought. On the other hand, the guests who were watching the competition with curious attitudes had become serious. The combat strength Xianxia revealed earlier was too shocking. It caused even these experts from the Divine Dao Protector clans to have the intention to compare Xianxia with their own clansmen. Did the two of you discern anything from that battle? Qin Daoyuan seemed to be lost in thought. He wore white clothes, had a handsome appearance, and his entire body was suffused by a primitive and simple aura. He seemed extremely unique. Everything occurred too quickly. It was very difficult to notice anything. Chen Qiushui frowned and pondered deeply as she spoke. Her dress was red like fire, and she herself was otherworldly, delicate, and charming. She was like a flaming lotus flower in full bloom, and she was peerlessly gorgeous. Merely based on the aura of his sword Dao, he at least possesses a cultivation at the 4th level of the Sword Emperor realm. That's quite inconceivable. Shouldn't a disciple of Oracle Mountain like him be skilled in the Talisman Dao? Chun Xiaoyun muttered while feeling slightly bewildered. The three of them had been divided into 3 different groups, and they tacitly agreed a long time ago that they wouldn't challenge their opponents impatiently. They intended to seize this opportunity to observe and study Xianxia's battles with the intention of fully determining the extent of Xianxia's trump cards and combat strengths. However, to their disappointment, Chun Bailing had been defeated too quickly, and it had taken them by surprise. So they'd been unable to discern anything valuable. However, it was exactly because Xianxia's display was too shocking that while they felt shocked, they'd roughly determined how terrifying Xianxia was. He was absolutely not as simple as his cultivation made it seem. The second battle is about to begin. We have to watch carefully this time, and we must determine exactly what his trump cards are. Chun Daoyuan instructed in a light voice. Of course. Both Chun Qiushui and Chun Xiaoyun nodded. In the combat arena. Clang. Clang. As soon as he ascended the arena, Chun Xiusha didn't hesitate at all to swing his arms, and then 2 bright golden short halberds that weigh over a meter long had appeared in his grasps. This pair of short halberds surged with golden light, and they were peerlessly sharp. Dense and complicated markings were branded on the halberds, and these markings faintly revealed the stellar bodies, landscape, and various other grand and extremely dazzling scenes. The dual spirit twin halberds. It was a pair of natural spirit treasures born from within the chaos of the 3 dimensions. Its might was all-powerful, and it was capable of destroying anything before it. When utilized in battle, it was capable of increasing its user's strength by 30%. Bang! In an instant, a clear howl resounded from the pair of short halberds that seemed as if they were made of gold, and it caused Chun Xiusha's imposing aura to suddenly change. A sharp glow shot into the sky from him, and he simply seemed like a golden god of slaughter that had emerged from the chaos of the primeval times while enveloped in peerless killing intent. Chun Xi, you can still admit defeat now. Otherwise, I'll make living worse than death for you and avenge junior brother Bailing. Chun Xiusha spoke while his eyes emanated strands of golden light, and it made him seem extremely terrifying. Oh! Chun Xi didn't say anything besides that single word of acknowledgement, and he seemed very haughty. However, in Chun Xiusha's opinion, Chun Xi's attitude was simply the greatest insult to his dignity. It caused his imposing aura to grow even sharper, while his killing intent even seemed material to the point of mincing the space around him into pieces. What shocking killing intent! As expected, this fellow, Chun Xiusha, is much stronger than Chun Bailing. But would he be able to defeat Chun Xi? Let's wait and see. The spectators in the surroundings were excited, and they exclaimed endlessly with admiration towards the imposing aura that Chun Xiusha revealed. Kill! At this moment, Chun Xiusha didn't speak further, and he waved the golden short halberds through space as he shot explosively at Chun Xi. His imposing aura was like a rainbow that was covered by killing intent, and every single move he made revealed an imposing and supreme aura that seemed extremely astonishing. If it was any other expert at the same realm of cultivation, that experts' minds would have probably been terrified by Chen Shuza's imposing aura before the battle had even begun, causing despair and helplessness to arise in that expert's heart. Rumble. The space on the combat arena collapsed and transformed into an expanse of chaos. Chen Shuza, who was covered in golden light, seemed like a sharp awl that intended to destroy everything. At this moment, everyone couldn't help but open their eyes wide and hold their breaths in concentration. They wanted to see how Chen Shi would resist this attack this time. After all, the battle between Chen Shi and Qin Bailing had occurred too quickly and ended too suddenly. All of them had been caught off guard, so they didn't even have the chance to react. This time, they would absolutely not let such an opportunity slip by. Swoosh! Chen Shi's figure moved amidst the gazes from everyone in the surroundings. At the instant that Chen Shuza had launched his attack, the mysterious and pitch-black talisman armament had soundlessly appeared in Chen Shi's grasp. After that, Chen Shi's figure vanished once more, and then the extremely ordinary and ethereal strand of sword chi that was faint like mist had appeared once more. The sword chi was still so inconspicuous. All of this was exactly similar to the move that Chen Shi had utilized to defeat Qin Bailing in the previous battle. However, because it was too swift, many people were still unable to discern the secrets of this attack. Chen Shuza couldn't help but laugh coldly when he saw this familiar scene. This fellow is really arrogant. He actually utilized the same move. Could it be that he thinks I'm as weak as Qin Bailing? Clang. Chen Shuza didn't hesitate to cross his halberds before striking forward. Peerless golden light coiled around the halberds, causing them to seem like two bolts of golden lightning. The heavens overlap as they are flawed. The earth splits from being damaged. Supreme truth of the martial Tao. Heaven flaw earth destruction. Rumble. The boundless golden light surged and enveloped the entire combat arena. It was blazing and grand to the extreme, and it caused the heavens and the earth to dim in comparison and wail. Many clansmen from the Chun clan felt a piercing pain in their eyes, and they weren't able to see everything clearly any longer. This attack was too powerful, dazzling, and impossible to look at. Only Dao Lords like Qin Lingkong, Wu Xuechan, and Tang Xian, and some formidable figures amongst the region lords like Chen Daoyuan, Chen Qiushui, and Chen Xiaoyun were able to remain unaffected. So, they clearly witnessed everything that occurred in the combat arena. This clearly showed that even if it was merely the second battle in the first round, the commotion it created was extremely great and terrifying. Obviously, with the example of Qin Bailing's defeat, Chen Shuza didn't dare hold back at all, and he'd utilized his strongest attack as soon as the battle had begun. Bang! In merely an instant, a world-shaking sound of collision resounded. It was simply like two universes had collided forcefully, and it was deafening and caused the world to dim down. Fortunately, the collision had occurred in the combat arena. If it had occurred in the outside world, then the terrifying destruction created by it would be simply unimaginable. The clansmen of the Chun clan were delighted because Chen Shuza had really not let them down, and he'd crushed that wisp of sword chi during the collision. However, they didn't even have the chance to feel happy before an astonishing scene appeared within their fields of vision. After the sword chi had been crushed, Chen Shi arrived with the talisman armament in his hand, and the edge of his sword actually forcefully chopped the bright golden dual-spirit twin halberds into half. This caused all the spectators to almost not dare believe their eyes, because at this moment, a natural spirit treasure that had been born from within the chaos of the three dimensions and had been passed down in the Chun clan for countless years was actually slashed into half by Chen Shi as if it was scrap metal. This was simply too astounding. Bang! Before they could even recover from their shock, Chen Shi's sword pierced through Chen Shuza's chest, and then he flicked his sword. It forcefully tore through Chen Shuza's chest and even severed his right arm. Swish! A rain of blood sprayed out from Chen Shuza's chest, and it seemed extremely horrifying. Ah! He let out a shrill cry as he was unable to endure such pain, and he couldn't believe that he'd actually been defeated by Chen Shi with a single move. This made his shrill and miserable cry carry a wisp of extreme frustration and anger. How could this be possible? How could this be possible? Bang! In the next moment, Chen Shi shot a forceful kick at him, and his figure smashed to the ground like a broken sandbag. He felt extremely dazed, and then his vision turned blank as he instantly fell unconscious. All the spectators in the surroundings were shocked, and the atmosphere was deathly silent. The clansmen of the Chun clan had their eyes wide open, and they were still unable to believe all of this. Chun Bailing had been defeated in an instant, and now, Chun Shuza had actually been crushed from a single move. So, how could they accept all of this? All the spectators were shocked speechless, and the atmosphere was deathly silent. No one had imagined that Chun Shuza's strongest pair of natural spirit treasures would actually be slashed apart by Chun Shi. Moreover, they hadn't imagined that Chun Shuza would actually still be unable to resist a single strike from Chun Shi. All of this seemed so bloody and shocking, and they practically didn't dare believe their eyes. How could this have happened? Chun Bailing was instantly defeat. Now, even Chun Shuza was actually unable to escape such misfortune. If Chun Shi was a 6-star region lord, then it would be understandable for him to be capable of accomplishing this. But the crux of the matter is that he's an innate god, and he's merely at the 4th-star region lord realm. All of this seemed inconceivable to them. There was a gap of 2 levels between their cultivations, while one was an innate god and the other wasn't. So, they wondered how exactly Chun Shi was capable of launching such a counterattack and accomplishing this. It was even to the extent that the battle had ended an instant after it began, and Chun Shuza was actually unable to resist even a single attack from him. This was too shocking and astounding. Damn it! Chun Lingkong's face turned gloomy while he felt infuriated to the limit. Perhaps Chun Bailing's miserable defeat was just an accident. But Chun Shuza's miserable defeat was absolutely not luck at all. All of this allowed Chun Lingkong to finally confirm that he'd underestimated Chun Shi since the very beginning. Chun Shi's cultivation was simply like a trap that made others unconsciously overlook him, but cultivation actually couldn't represent a person's true combat strength. Fortunately, this was only the second battle during the first round of the competition, and Chun Lingkong had prepared all sorts of contingencies even before the competition had even begun. So, failure in the first 2 battles was unable to fully disappoint him. It was even to the extent that Chun Lingkong felt slightly fortunate right now. He felt fortunate that he'd arranged numerous contingencies in advance, so he was able to avoid being caught off guard by this sudden and unexpected event. Impossible! This is absolutely impossible. That fellow is clearly a mere 4th-star region lord, so how could his combat strength possibly be so formidable? Even Chun Shuza, who's a peak 6-star region lord, was no match for a single attack from him. This is simply indescribable. Damn it! Truly damnable. Alas! Could it be that everyone has forgotten that he's a personal disciple of Oracle Mountain? Now that he has dared to step foot into our clan with the intent of encroaching on the position of successor, he has definitely come prepared. We've really underestimated that fellow. The clansmen of the Chun clan had erupted into a mighty uproar, and there were sounds of rage, shock, disbelief, sighs, and so on and so forth coming from them. But no matter what, these 2 battles allowed them to finally understand that while Chun Shi's cultivation was inferior to his fellow competitors, Chun Shi's combat strength was something that couldn't be judged by convention. Unprecedented. Simply heaven-defying. The disciples of Oracle Mountain really do deserve their reputation. I heard that his father is Chun Lingjun, who has completed Reincarnation. Moreover, he has the backing of Oracle Mountain now. Looks like he has great plans. Perhaps he intends to rescue his father and clear Chun Lingjun's name? All the guests from the Divine Tao Protector clans discussed in low voices, and they felt like their horizons had been expanded when they witnessed the heaven-defying combat strength that Chun Shi revealed. At the same time, all of them guessed that Chun Shi definitely had huge plans since he'd come prepared. He instantly defeated another. Perfect! Wuxia and Tang Xian exchanged gazes and smiled at each other. They were very clearly aware that their little junior brother had obtained a huge amount of peerless fortuitous encounters within the forgotten grounds of chaos lately. He's refined and absorbed 9 region quintessences, and it was unprecedented. There wasn't a single person like him in history who'd accomplished such a feat. Moreover, they were very clearly aware that since Chun Shi was the 9th savior of this era, the inheritances Chun Shi possessed weren't just limited to the 8 saviors before him, and he even possessed the inheritances from the last 8 eras. Coupled with forces that were considered a taboo like the river diagram and samsara, even Wu Shuachan and Tang Xian weren't sure exactly how formidable Chun Shi was right now. After all, even though they possessed extraordinary ability, they weren't saviors themselves, nor had they established a region that was formed from an entire 9 region quintessences like Chun Shi had. It was even to the extent that they hadn't even felt the energy of samsara and the river diagram. Under such circumstances, it was naturally very difficult for them to determine exactly how formidable Chun Shi's current combat strength was. All of this meant that besides still being inferior to them in terms of cultivation, Chun Shi's progress on the path towards the Tao had moved to an unprecedented and unique path of greatness. He's very formidable. Chun Daoyuan remained silent for a long while before he resolved the shock in his heart, and he gazed at that tall figure on the combat arena as he lightly spat out 2 words. Chun Shi had made a very formidable display indeed. He was strong to the point that it exceeded Chun Daoyuan's expectations. Chun Daoyuan had clearly witnessed everything that occurred during the battle just now, and he'd determined 2 things. Firstly, Chun Shi's cultivation really was nothing to worry about, but Chun Shi's combat strength could be considered to be heaven-defying. At the very least, it was sufficient for Chun Shi to go against experts at the 7-star region Lord Realm. Secondly, the sword in Chun Shi's hand was extremely formidable. It was capable of easily slashing the dual-spirit twin halberds into 2, so it was definitely not something an ordinary natural treasure could compare to, and it could even be considered as an extraordinary divine weapon. The only thing Chun Daoyuan felt regretful towards was that the battle had still ended too quickly, so he was still unable to observe Chun Shi's true strength and trump cards. This made Chun Daoyuan start to become vigilant, and he finally took Chun Shi to be a significant enemy. He had a feeling that the reason Chin 11 had made such a formidable and astonishing display during these 2 battles were definitely not merely for the sake of flaunting his strength. I suddenly have the impulse to fight this fellow, Chun Qiushui muttered through her fiery red lips, and she gazed at Chun Shi with misty and starry eyes. She was peerlessly gorgeous. Me too. Chun Xiaoyun puckered his lips and lightly spat out 2 words. Every single one of these words was murderous and carried a ghastly and chilly aura. Wait a while longer. The 3rd battle is about to being. If he'd able to defeat Chun Wenyu, who's a 7th-star region lord during this battle. Chun Daoyuan pondered deeply before he spoke, and his tranquil eyes surged with a strange glow. At that time, he'll finally be worthy of us making a move against him. In next to no time, Chun Shu's unconscious body was moved down from the combat arena, and only Chun Shi's figure stood there. Moreover, his expression was calm and indifferent as before. He was still the same person, but the gazes everyone shot at him had soundlessly undergone changes. There was fear, surprise, bewilderment, resentment. Even though all of these feelings were still extremely hostile, there was no disdain and contempt like there was at the beginning. Chun Shi had obviously used his strength to prove himself through these 2 battles, and he'd indirectly crushed the spirits of the Chun clan's clansmen. So they didn't dare look down upon him anymore. Just you are left, so come right up. Chun Shi spoke abruptly, and his eyes that were deep like 2 abysses shot towards Chun Wenyu. Chun Wenyu had white hair, skin that was fair like the skin of a baby, and he was extremely handsome. Moreover, he emanated a stable and composed aura. Most importantly, he was a 7th-star region lord. Even though both Chun Bailing and Chun Shuza were 6-star region lords and were only a single realm below Chun Wenyu, this gap couldn't be underestimated at all. If it was in terms of the strength they possessed, then the gap between these 2 levels of cultivation was absolutely like the gap between the heavens and the earth. Chun Shi had utilized his combat strength to prove that even if he was a 4th-star region lord, he could surmount levels of cultivation to defeat 6-star region lords. Yet now, the final battle in this round was won against Chun Wenyu, who was a 7th-star region lord. So, would Chun Shi be able to put on such a formidable display once more? Everyone was paying attention to this. Of course, those clansmen of the Chun clan naturally didn't hope for Chun Shi to continue putting on a formidable display. On the contrary, they urgently hoped that Chun Wenyu's entrance into the battlefield could stop all of this and turn the situation around completely. But it was very obvious that because they changed their opinion towards the combat strength that Xianxia possessed, no one dared to rashly provide a verdict about the upcoming battle. Of course, Chen Wenyu's expression remained unchanged when he heard Xianxia, and then he nodded and strode up onto the combat arena. His actions were calm and composed, and he seemed very extraordinary. His steady, imposing aura that was neither arrogant or impetuous caused all the clansmen of the Chun clan in the surroundings to be affected by him, and they calmed down. Chun Lingkong's eyes couldn't help but glow when he witnessed this scene, and he praised endlessly in his heart. Even his anxious mental state had burned once more with a wisp of anticipation. Big Brother Wenyu is extraordinary indeed. His talent took time to mature, but his bearing is extraordinary. Even though his cultivation is much weaker than ours, he has stridden steadily step by step to attain his current accomplishments, so his foundation is extremely solid. Even I feel extreme admiration towards him. Chun Daoyuan couldn't help but sigh with emotion as he sized Chun Wenyu up. His point of view obtained the acknowledgement of Chun Qiushui and Chen Xiaoyun as well. This fellow isn't bad. Tang Xian gave rare voice to his opinion. Do you have the feeling that the shadow of someone can be faintly discerned from him? Wu Shuichan seemed to be lost in thought. Who? Tang Xian was stunned, and then a bright glow suddenly flashed through his eyes. You're talking about Chun Lingjun from all those years ago. No wonder I felt that his bearing was slightly familiar. Looks like he's taking the same path Chun Lingjun took all those years ago. There's nothing wrong with taking the path of a predecessor. Unfortunately, every person has his own path, and obsessively pursuing the path of another would cause one to lose oneself instead. Wu Shuichan sighed with emotion. While the two of them were in conversation, Chan Wenyu had ascended the combat arena, and he looked calmly at Xianxia with a gaze that was clear as water. Your father from all those years ago was the senior I admired the most in my entire lifetime. In my heart, there's no other person who can compare to him. Even though you aren't a member of my Chun clan, you're still closely related to him. I merely hope that you won't disappoint him. His voice was calm like water, and it wasn't overbearing at all. However, when these words entered into Chun Lingkong's ears, it caused him to be unable to help but frown. Presently, Chun Lingkong was being imprisoned like a prisoner who'd committed serious crimes. But Chun Wenyu had actually spoken such words, and it made him feel slightly uncomfortable. The person he admired the most? No one can compare to him? How absurd! If it wasn't out of consideration for the current situation, Chun Lingkong would have already berated Chun Wenyu. It wasn't just Chun Lingkong. The other clansmen of the Chun clan couldn't help but be slightly stunned when they heard this. They were slightly unable to understand why Chun Wenyu would admire a criminal to such an extent. However, they were clearly aware that Chun Wenyu admired Chen Lingjun during his previous life. It wasn't the Chun Lingjun who'd undergone reincarnation and had been reduced to a criminal. They couldn't be lumped together at all. Chun Shi was of the same mind as well. So he hadn't felt even a trace of pride. Because his father had been reduced to a prisoner now, and he wasn't that Chun Lingjun from all those years ago. Make your move. Chun Shi withdrew the talisman armament and pointed it at Chun Wenyu from afar, and then a sharp and fierce aura suddenly swept out from Chan Shi. Forgive me for the offense. Chun Wenyu flicked his sleeve and withdrew a sword as well. The sword was over a meter long and completely suffused with hazy starlight. It was brilliant, illusory, gorgeous, and dazzling. Bang! Even though they hadn't attacked, the aura they emanated seemed like storms that collided with each other, and it crushed space, caused the world to dim down, and instilled horror in the hearts of all. In an instant, Chan Shi's gaze was like a bolt of lightning while his long hair fluttered. He was like an emperor of the sword, and he possessed peerlessly supreme might. On the other hand, Chun Wenyu's imposing aura had changed as well. His snow-white hair fluttered while he seemed unfathomably deep like an ancient abyss. Both of them stood in confrontation from afar. It was simply like a fight for supremacy between two peerless emperors of the sword, and it shook the wind and clouds throughout the world. How formidable! This is a collision between peak sword daos. And it's bound to be peerless and world-shocking. Who would have imagined that Xianxia would actually be able to rely on a cultivation at the 4th star of the Region Lord realm to go against a 7th star Region Lord? I'm truly unable to see through this battle. After they witnessed the scene that occurred on the combat arena, a wave of agitation swept through the surroundings while discussions arose from all directions. All of them were shocked by the imposing auras revealed by Xianxia and Chen Wenyu. The 4th level of the Sword Emperor realm. Very good. I'm slightly inferior to you in terms of the Sword Dao. Chen Wenyu's eyes narrowed slightly, and it was like his edge was restrained within him. You're not bad yourself. A cultivation at the 7th star of the Region Lord realm is sufficient to make up for that and occupy an advantage. Xianxia spoke indifferently while he remained calm and composed. The two of them seemed to be in no hurry to attack. Or perhaps, they were silently observing each other while searching for the best moment to attack. The atmosphere here seemed to be calm, but it was actually a sign of an impending storm. It caused many people in the surroundings to be unable to avoid feeling anxious, and in their days they even had the misconception of feeling a suffocating aura. It was like it would be fine while everything on the combat arena remained the same, but once it did change, it would be like a swift and thunderous bolt of lightning that was capable of overturning the world. The surroundings were deathly silent. The attention of everyone had been drawn over to the combat arena, and they'd held their breaths in concentration while staring fixedly at the situation on the combat arena. They seemed to be deeply afraid of missing the slightest detail. How about we determine the outcome with a single strike? Suddenly, Chen Wenyu spoke and actually raised the suggestion to decide the outcome with a single exchange. Many people were visibly moved by this. They thought Chen Wenyu was giving tooth for tooth and intended to utilize such a method to defeat Xianxia so that he could avenge Chen Bailing and Chen Shuza. Only a small portion of extraordinary figures had noticed some tiny clues, and they were clearly aware that Chen Wenyu hadn't been able to find even the slightest flaw after observing Xianxia until now. So, he'd made such a suggestion with the intention of attaining victory in one go. There was no doubt that such a decision was extremely risky, yet it was very wise as well. So long as he succeeded, then he would be able to stop Xianxia's footsteps and eliminate Xianxia from the competition. Could Chen Wenyu accomplish it? Even though it was impossible to confirm, he definitely had a very good chance. After all, he was a 7th star Region Lord and even possessed a cultivation in the Sword Dao that was merely slightly inferior to Xianxia. Even if he was unable to defeat Xianxia with a single move, the slightest advantage would be enough for him to attain victory in the battle. All of this was suitable to be utilized on Xianxia as well. So long as he was able to attain the slightest advantage, then he would be able to attain victory in the battle as well. Simply speaking, this suggestion seemed to be very beneficial to Chen Wenyu, but it didn't take advantage of Xianxia at all. In the opinion of those people that were unable to discern the truth, they instinctively felt that Xianxia would definitely not dare to agree to this suggestion. After all, it was a huge gamble. So, how could Xianxia have the courage to agree to it while facing Chen Wenyu, who was a 7th star Region Lord? However, an unexpected scene occurred. Xianxia had nodded calmly not long after Chen Wenyu finished speaking, and he said, "I'm of the same mind as well." Everyone was surprised. Some felt that Xianxia had become extremely arrogant from winning 2 battles in succession, and he was unable to endure such provocation. Some started to feel slight admiration towards Xianxia's courage. At the very least, they would definitely ponder on it for a long time if they were in Xianxia's place, and they would surely not agree rashly. Good. Chen Wenyu revealed a rare wisp of a smile as he praised. After that, his expression became solemn. He tightened his grasp and a clear howl resounded from the sword in his hand while he stood on the spot without moving. However, his sword was slowly stabbed forward bit by bit in an extremely slow manner. It was even slow to the point others wondered if they were seeing things. Because his movement was even slower than Immortal, and it was simply like a snail that was moving bit by bit. As his sword moved, the sword howl it emanated grew more and more resounding. In the end, it was like a tide that covered the heavens and the earth as it surged through the world. Many felt their eardrums tremble while the vital energy within their entire bodies roiled. A restless and disgusted feeling arose in their hearts while their minds couldn't help but tremble. Thump! Thump! In the end, the sword howl was actually resounding like a divine thunderclap that shook through the sky. It was vast and terrifying to the extreme. Some clansmen of the Chun clan with comparatively weaker cultivations were unable to endure the might of this attack, and their knees weakened as they instantly fell unconscious on the ground. It was such a slow attack, yet just its sword howl revealed such terrifying might. It was simply world-shocking, astounding, and beyond imagination. At this moment, there was finally no one who dared to underestimate this attack. Because even thought it was slow, a myriad of strands of divine aura had converged onto it. As Chun Wenyu's opponent, Chun Shi's eyes couldn't help but narrow before they returned to normal. Swoosh! The pitch-black and ordinary talisman armament flashed out soundlessly. It was like an extremely ordinary pool of limpid water as it stabbed forward. His movement was neither fast nor slow, otherworldly, and completely natural. It was like this strike of the sword should be like this. It was like the process of blowing and wilting of flowers, the movement between high tide and low tide, the alternation of the stellar bodies. Everything was a rule of nature. Such a natural strike of the sword was naturally common, and it couldn't be said to be world-shocking at all. It was just so simple and straightforward. It was even to the extent of being extremely ordinary and common, like a child swinging a wooden sword about without restraint. This scene caused many to be stunned as well. What sort of sword Dao is this? A strike that has returned to simplicity. No, this strike doesn't have the truth required to return to simplicity. A strike that seizes the wonders of nature? No, it isn't a wonder at all, nor does it carry the aura of nature. Could it be that it's just an ordinary strike of the sword? Many people couldn't understand it and were extremely bewildered. It was even to the extent that they thought Chun Shi had been terrified by the sword howl from Chen Wenyu's attack, causing him to lose his composure and execute such a useless and laughable attack. However, the gazes of those figures with extraordinary cultivations couldn't help but focus when they saw Chun Shi execute this attack. This attack is extremely unusual, because it was too ordinary, too normal, and too common. So, it seemed to be too unordinary, too uncommon, and too abnormal. This was an aura of the sword that was very difficult to explain. It was so natural to the point it seemed to be a part of nature. Chun Wenyu had clearly noticed how unique Chun Shi's attack was. His eyelids had twitched imperceptibly, and he suddenly took a deep breath. Bang! In an instant, a myriad of strands of starlight suddenly erupted from his sword. It was like fireworks, like burning clouds, like a gorgeous dream world. It was dazzling and resplendent to the extreme. It caused the stars, moon, and sun to dim down, and it caused the everything in the world to dim in comparison. It seemed like it was impossible to find an existence that was more shocking and resplendent than this strike of the sword. It was grand. It was gorgeous. It was dazzling. The imposing aura of this attack instantly terrified many clansmen of the Chun clan, causing them to be dumbstruck on the spot. It was like their souls had fallen into an abyss, causing them to lose their souls and seem like puppets. Good! Chun Lingkong praised in his heart, while many seniors in the surroundings nodded endlessly as well, because this strike of the sword seemed to have seized the world. Chun Shi acted completely indifferent towards this. His expression was calm as before, and the stab he executed was still ordinary, common, calm, and natural. It hadn't changed at all because of the change in the aura of Chun Wenyu's attack. It was just like before, and it showed no sign of stopping. At this moment, regardless of whether it was Chun Wenyu's attack or Chun Shi's attack, they were on the verge of being completed, and they were about to be fully struck. However, the scenes revealed by their attacks were completely different. Because Chun Shi's ordinary, natural, and casual strike of the sword had already been downed by the light emanated by Chen Wenyu's grand, gorgeous, and dazzling attack. It was like a pearl that had been drowned by the glow of the moon, and there was no value in its existence anymore. This made many clansmen of the Chun clan feel delighted. They felt that Chun Shi had run out of tracks and would definitely lose this agreement to end the battle with a single move. However, right at this moment, Chun Wenyu couldn't help but frown as he faintly felt a trace of indescribable worry. His opponent was too calm and composed, while the strike his opponent executed was the same. It was so ordinary to the point that others couldn't help but wonder if it was a joke. It's definitely not a joke. Chen Wenyu was clearly aware that Xianxia's cultivation in the Sword Dao was so great that very few in the entire Chen clan could rival him. On the other hand, he was slightly inferior to Xianxia. So, even if such a figure was far inferior to him in terms of cultivation, how could the Sword Dao executed by such a figure be a joke? There's definitely some sort of secret behind it. Chen Wenyu took another deep breath, and then the imposing aura of his attack actually changed once more in this short instant. The grand starlight dimmed down and was restrained. The gorgeous glow dispersed and vanished, and the dazzling sword chi suddenly fell silent and dark. Everything had lost its beauty, and its brilliance waned. Its splendor had flown off silently like water. The imposing aura of Chen Wenyu's attack became restrained, and it wasn't grand, gorgeous, and dazzling anymore. On the contrary, it had become simple, primitive, and otherworldly. It was like it had shed all its splendor and beauty to return to its true appearance, and its imposing aura actually grew even more terrifying. The spectators exclaimed with shock. Before this, they'd already felt that Chen Wenyu would definitely win. Yet never had they imagined that the aura of his strike would actually change at this critical moment, and it became even more formidable. Could it be that he intends to crush Chen Xi in one go? The members of the Chen clan felt even more excited, delighted, and filled with anticipation. On the other hand, Chen Xi's attack was still so ordinary and common. It was calm like water, reserved, and boring. It wasn't terrifying at all. That kid's going to lose for sure. Many spectators couldn't help but take pleasure in Chen Xi's misfortune, and there were even some that were imagining the miserable appearance Chen Xi would have upon suffering defeat. Finally, their swords collided under the gazes of everyone. But surprisingly, this collision actually didn't make even the slightest sound. It was silent, strangely silent. These two completely different attacks should have been like fire and water, and they should have collided violently. Moreover, the destruction created by their collision should have definitely been world-shocking. Yet now, there was actually not a single sound. What's going on? Everyone was astounded. Only Dao Lords like Wu Xuechan, Tang Xian, and Chun Lingkong, and some other figures with extraordinary cultivations were able to notice an inkling. It caused them to be instantly become visibly moved. The greatest was the most imperceptible. The loudest was the most difficult to hear. It was exactly because their force was too formidable and condensed that the collision hadn't caused any phenomena to appear, and it couldn't be displayed by any sound as well. The might of their collision was vividly displayed by this. The others didn't understand it and were unable to figure it out. They merely thought that they were unable to experience how terrifying it was because they weren't in the battlefield. It was even not exaggerated to say that if some other region lords were to enter the combat arena right now, those region lords would definitely suffer imperceptibly backlash and perish on the spot. Because the force within the combat arena had already collided to its limits. It was like the eye of a storm. It seemed to be calm, but so long as anything external force were to enter it, then it would instantly cause everything to erupt and lose its balance. Such a collision in the Sword Dao is absolutely rare to come by in the entire world. Someone sighed with emotion. I wonder who exactly will win in the end. Someone else was urgently waiting for everything to come to an end. Clang, clang. After a short while, the swords that were in confrontation with each other had been withdrawn at practically the exact same time, and they emanated sword howls that destroyed the absolute silence in the surroundings. When they looked towards the combat arena, they saw Chen Wenyu's figure was standing firm on the spot. His snow-white hair fluttered while his expression was composed as before, and only traces of sweat were faintly seeping out from his forehead. On the other side, Chen Xi's tall figure had a calm and indifferent expression while his clothes fluttered, and there was only a trace of shock on the space between his brows. Both of them were standing on the spot in silence. The spectators were astounded when they witnessed this scene, and they almost didn't dare believe their eyes. Who exactly won this battle? Could it be that they were evenly matched? Clamorous noise arose throughout the surroundings as the spectators discussed animatedly. and all of them were unable to accept such a situation. After all, the Might Chun she revealed earlier was truly too ordinary, and everyone thought that he would definitely lose. Yet who would have imagined that it would actually transform into an evenly matched situation in the end? Many even wondered if Chun Wenyu had held back on purpose. Otherwise, how could this have occurred? Look! Quickly! That fellow's hand that holds his sword is bleeding. Haha! He lost! Suddenly, someone noticed a strand of extremely inconspicuous blood that was flowing down Chen Shi's palm, and that person couldn't help but exclaim with pleasant surprise. It was like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples upon striking a lake. At this moment, the others noticed it clearly as well, and they were excited. As expected, it was that fellow who lost. Since it was a battle that would be determined by a single exchange, then even the tiniest injury would be sufficient to decide that it's his loss. Ha ha ha! I thought that this fellow would truly be heaven-defying to the point of being impossible to stop. Who would have imagined that he isn't anything great? He couldn't even persist until the end during the first round of the competition. I knew it. With Chun Wenyu's cultivation at the 7th star region Lord Realm, how could he possibly be unable to subdue a fellow who's merely a 4th star region lord? What a pity! If he wasn't restrained by their agreement and continued the battle, then he would definitely be able to cripple that kid's cultivation. Clamorous noise shook the sky while all the clansmen of the Chun clan cheered. Earlier, they'd accumulated a bellyful of grievance from Chun Bailing and Chun Shu's miserable defeats. Now they could finally vent it all, so how could they not feel elated and satisfied? However, Chun Lingkong wasn't able to arouse any happiness in his heart. His brows were knit together tightly while his expression grew gloomier and gloomier. He seemed to be trying his best to restrain his rage. It wasn't just him. Some other great figures from the Chun clan were silent at this moment as well, and the space between their brows was covered in gloominess. Unfortunately, the clansmen of the Chun clan were overjoyed, and there were actually very few of them who noticed this strange scene. It was even to the extent that some started to impatiently point their fingers at Chun Shi and shout, "Kid, quickly get down from there. Could it be that you intend to be a sore loser?" Exactly. Quickly get the fuck off the arena. Get the fuck down. Get the fuck down. After that, many other members of the Chun clan started to kick up a fuss and shout, and they ridiculed and insulted Chun Shi to the extreme. This made the veins on Chun Lingkong's forehead bulge up while the corners of his mouth twitched uncontrollably. He was just about to speak when Chun Wenyu, who'd remained silent until now, had suddenly sighed while he put his sword away. "It is I who lost." These words caused the clamorous atmosphere to instantly freeze. Chun Wenyu lost? How could that be possible? They opened their eyes wide and didn't dare believe their ears. So, they stood dumbstruck on the spot while staring blankly at Chun Wenyu. The atmosphere became deathly silent once more while everyone felt surprised and bewildered. What exactly is going on? Chun Wenyu, are you letting that kid win on purpose? Someone shouted with rage. Chun Wenyu acted indifferent towards this. He had a slightly disappointed and dispirited expression as he turned around and walked down the combat arena by himself. Every single step he took was so slow. It was like he was dragging an extremely heavy divine mountain along, and it caused the hearts of everyone to be unable to help but tighten. Pooh! When Chen Wenyu's figure arrived at the edge of the combat arena, he suddenly opened his mouth before a mouthful of blood sprayed out. In an instant, his countenance turned ghastly pale while his eyes dimmed down, and his figure was on the verge of collapse. The spectators were stunned. How could they had imagined that Chun Wenyu had actually lost for real? Moreover, he'd even suffered extremely terrifying internal injuries that made him cough up blood. When Chen Wenyu's figure vanished from the combat arena, the clansmen of the Chun clan were still unable to recover from their shock, because all of this was too inconceivable, and it had exceeded the scope of their understanding. Sorry, I wasn't able to let all of you continue feeling happy. I've won. Right at this moment, Chun Shi put his sword away, and then he glanced indifferently at the members of the Chun clan in the surroundings while he spoke calmly with a tone that wasn't overbearing at all. However, when it entered into their ears, it was like a resounding slap on their face, and it caused their faces to burn with pain. earlier they were still feeling excited and overjoyed, and they were shouting at Xianxia to get the fuck down from the combat arena. But reality was always so unexpected. Xianxia hadn't lost, and it was Chen Wenyu who'd coughed up blood and left in dejection. How could they have imagined all of this? It hurt. It hurt too much. This slap to the face didn't need any extra words. Reality itself was the most resounding slap, and it struck the faces of ignorant bastards. At the same time, Wuxia and Tang Xian finally revealed a wisp of a smile, and then they didn't hold back at all as they clapped and praised. Some of the guests in the vicinity started clapping unconsciously as they were shocked by Xianxia's display. But right after that, they realized that the members of the Chen clan were aggrieved right now, so their actions were slightly inadvisable. However, Chen Lingkong and the other clansmen of the Chen clan had noticed it, so they couldn't help but feel infuriated. They felt like they'd been utterly humiliated. The third battle belongs to Xianxia. Chen Lingkong disregarded everything and announced the outcome with haste. At the same time, Xianxia is the only candidate from the fourth group who has entered the second round. As soon as he finished speaking, no one congratulated Xianxia, and the surroundings were deathly silent while all the members of the Chen clan revealed gloomy expressions. Xianxia didn't mind all of this at all. He flicked his sleeve and walked off the combat arena. Meanwhile, battles were still being carried out on the other three arenas. But they weren't battles that came to a swift end like Xianxia's battles had. He's merely executed 3 attacks in 3 battles, and it could be said to be the perfect example of ending a battle swiftly. Xianxia noticed that Chen Daoyuan, Chen Qiushui, and Chen Xiaoyun still hadn't ascended the combat arena to issue a challenge until now, and they could only wait helplessly. Xianxia couldn't help but laugh coldly to himself upon noticing this scene. He naturally understood their intentions, and it was none other than to delay until the end and seize the opportunity to observe his battles with the intent of observing his flaws and trump cards. Unfortunately, they were unable to accomplish that, because since the moment that the first battle had begun, Xianxia was determined to never strike a second attack if he could defeat his opponent with just 1 attack. The objective behind this decision of his was naturally to prevent Chen Daoyuan, Chen Qiushui, and Chen Xiaoyun from accomplishing what they desired. Otherwise, how could he have agreed to end the battle against Chen Wenyu with a single attack when he knew that he wouldn't be able to gain any advantage in the collision? He wasn't an idiot that was overwhelmed by impulse. Now, I finally understand that this fellow seemed to have never intended to let us observe his trump cards since the beginning. But I never expected that he would actually be able to accomplish this. Just this alone makes him worthy of us taking him seriously. Chen Daoyuan sighed with emotion. His combat strength is formidable indeed. But what I'm even more concerned about is, wouldn't he get to observe our battles when we ascend the combat arena later? Chen Xiaoyun frowned as he said, "What if that fellow figures out our combat styles from our battles? That would be quite disadvantageous. Then we should end the battle quickly as well. Since he can accomplish it, then we can naturally accomplish it as well. Moreover, we can accomplish it perfectly," said Chen Qiushui in a resolute tone. "I'm afraid our worries are unnecessary." Chen Daoyuan suddenly laughed bitterly while he glanced towards the distance.